Hi, this is Christopher Dragon, Music Director of your Wyoming Symphony Orchestra. The opening of our 73rd season begins with one of the most monumental pieces of music, Beethoven's Symphony No. 9, hence the title of the program, Ode to Joy. Ludwig van Beethoven was a German composer and pianist that was a crucial figure in the transition between the classical and romantic eras in music. Romantic composers prioritized individual and emotional expression above its form, which was a key element of the classical era. Now, they didn't completely break away from structure, but instead used these forms as a foundation without being constrained by them. As we've heard throughout my time with the WSO, Beethoven's symphonies in particular shifted the train of what a symphony could be, with his final symphony, his ninth, truly changing the course of all music that followed. Like his famous Symphony No. 5 that we opened last season with, his ninth also has that journey from darkness to light. The first movement begins with an anxious shimmering in the strings, followed by a fragment of the melody to come. It sets the atmosphere, instantly, of embarking on a monumental journey. Gradually, it builds in intensity until bursting open with a large, violent statement of our fully conceived theme in the key of D minor, giving it that darkness that I mentioned earlier on. It then melts away, bringing us back to that shimmering opening, for it to build once again, shifting to different harmonies until a new hammered theme brings us back to the tumultuous darkness of D minor. However, this doesn't last long, as Beethoven introduces a contrasting second subject group, which was quite standard in the structure of traditional first movements. It has a pastoral feeling, giving us some much needed repose from all the tension that preceded. We then are introduced to a proud, grand rhythmic idea which Beethoven immediately elaborates on, even using it to close the exposition of this movement in a triumphant manner. This brings us to the development section, where the ideas we previously heard are explored even further. It begins once more with that murmuring opening, except this time it is extended, exploring its way through various keys, eventually building again to that triumphant material, except this time sounding quite discordant. Beethoven then introduces us to a fragment of our first theme, which is used in dialogue between the winds. You will hear this fragment of dialogue return throughout the development. The next significant section you will hear is a triple fugue, meaning there is a main musical theme, in this case our main violent theme, and two counter subjects, which are other melodic themes, that are developed simultaneously. In other words, it is a very complex musical structure, and of course Beethoven would choose to work that into a symphony. Here is that triple fugue. This complex fugue moves through various keys and harmonies, and at this point, we are only about halfway through the development section. We would be here forever if we went through every single idea that was elaborated in this section, which I think brings us to one of the key points about this Ninth Symphony, in that it is structurally of such a large scale. The transition back into the recapitulation section, where we hear that opening material once again, is one of the most striking moments of the symphony and really broke the conventions of what was expected. Instead of returning to that quiet, anxious shimmer, Beethoven instead comes blazing with a strong statement of that opening material in a bright major key. It does eventually go back to the stormy, dark material that we previously heard, with a few modifications along the way. You would think everything is done and dusted for this movement. However, Beethoven, pushing the boundaries of what we expect, adds a new melodic theme at the very end of the movement. To me, it's almost like a funeral march over an extremely unsettling accompaniment of chromatic movement in the strings. Chromatic meaning stepwise movement, the smallest space we can have between notes. This idea, of course, builds to a powerful ending, setting the tone of the overall symphony and setting us up for that journey from darkness to light. We then come to the second movement, which is a scherzo, and is also humongous in structure, which in itself was not something you would expect from a traditionally light-hearted movement. Right at the beginning, a rhythmic idea is introduced, which basically is the seed of which this movement is built upon. Straight away, you hear this rhythmic idea start the main melody of the fugue, building in the strings section by section. To me, it creates this atmosphere of fantasy as it kind of bubbles along. This grows to a forceful statement of the main theme heard by the full orchestra. A contrasting transition which takes the bite out of our rhythmic idea leads us to our second theme, a joyful folk dance. You hear the winds launching with their melody over the raucous strings. As mentioned before, this symphony is humongous in structure and is very complex. So instead of moving on to the middle section featuring new contrasting material, which is what we would typically find in a second movement, Beethoven instead develops these ideas. In this case, changing the grouping and length of the melody into 3-bar phrases, giving it a charming dance kind of feel. This builds to a restatement of our forceful main theme by the whole orchestra for basically a kind of recapitulation, which is where that opening material is repeated. So once again, to get an idea of the scope, the entire first movement, we had this kind of structure. A main theme, a contrasting second theme, development of these ideas, and then the recapitulation. For this second movement, the opening section of it alone has this structure within it. I know this is feeling a bit like the movie Inception, in that it's like we have a dream inside a dream. All that aside, we finally come to our middle section of the movement, the trio section. As expected, it is a contrast to the previous raucous music. It now has become quite merry in character, which we first hear in the bouncy woodwinds, then answered by the warm lyrical strings. Our opening rhythmic material eventually returns, where we hear a full statement once again of those themes, the development of them and its recapitulation. To end the movement, Beethoven has a bit of a joke. We expect to hear our merry middle section once more, however, Beethoven abruptly stops, and with 9 notes, unexpectedly ends the movement. Movement 3 of the symphony is the slow movement, and as expected, it is songful and full of beauty. It is a set of variations built on 2 alternating themes, the first of which is this extremely long, heartfelt theme, which seems as if it is never ending. We hear it in the strings with echoes in the winds. The second theme, heard in the strings, still has that warmth to it, but unlike that first theme, which kind of just floats, this melody has more momentum, giving it that extra little bit of tenderness. To me, the music here is very romantic and illustrates where the future of the symphony sound world is heading. For example, think the music of Mahler. We now come to our first variation, which is built on that never-ending first theme. Now, although the melody has more flourishes and elaborations, you can hear that the structure and character is reminiscent of that first theme. Here is just a snippet of that variation. As expected, we then hear a variation of our tender second theme, but this time Beethoven decides to change the instrumentation, meaning the combination of instruments that are used. So instead of hearing that melody in the strings, this time he puts it in the woodwinds. After a brief transition, we are brought to our final variation of the main never-ending theme. Here, Beethoven changes the meter of the music, meaning how many beats are in a bar, and adds even more flourishes in the first violins, overall resulting in a level of elegance, like a waltz, with the first violins twirling above. Further explorations of this first theme occur until an unexpected fanfare sounds where we hear the trumpets for the first time in this movement, bringing us to the coda, the closing section of the movement. For our performance, we will be taking an intermission here. The first three movements of this symphony combined are longer than most of the entire symphonies that we have performed in the past. So we figured it would be a good place to take a little breather to recoup. Now the fourth movement is what this symphony is most well known for, as it contains the famous Ode to Joy. However, there is a little bit of a journey before we get to that moment. After an opening filled with terror, Beethoven revisits a fragment of the main theme from the previous three movements. However, each time it is interrupted by a recitative in the cellos and basses. A recitative is a device used in opera, basically a musical way of notating speech. This is what it sounds like. It is as if Beethoven is searching for that perfect melody, going through all the previous ones and just not quite finding the right fit. After much searching, he does eventually find that Ode to Joy melody, emerging from the depths, starting in the cellos and basses, and gradually blossoming to the full orchestra. This being his most complex symphony, Beethoven is not done, as the frantic terror explodes once again, this time bringing us to the greatest revelation of this symphony, the addition of the human voice. To us, this might not seem like a big deal, but back then, voices had never been added to a symphony before. In this finale, Beethoven adds not only a quartet of solo voices, but also a whole chorus. So instead of the bass cello recitative following, we are instead introduced to a baritone soloist singing the translated text of, "O friends, not more of these sounds. Let us sing more cheerful songs, more full of joy." And so he turns to the main theme, the Ode to Joy, a poem written by Friedrich Schiller, which creates this vision of heavenly joy where all mankind shall be united. So the baritone soloist begins to sing the Ode to Joy theme to Schiller's text, with the chorus singing the second half back.
Eine Zauber binden wieder was die Mode strenge treibt. Alle Menschen werden müde, wo dein sanfter Flügel weilt. Deine Zauberwände wieder, was die Mode strenge treibt. Alle Menschen werden müde, wo dein sanfter Flügel weilt.
We are now very much in the full swing of things, with the full vocal quartet of soloists and chorus being utilized as the piece progresses, each time becoming more elaborate. We then come to a brilliant climactic key change on the text, "Before God." It's as if the heavens have burst open. What follows is totally unexpected. A military marching band coming from the distance, playing a variation of our Ode to Joy melody. Our solo tenor joins with some male reinforcements from the chorus that then throws us into you guessed it, another fugue. It is full of energy which eventually settles before opening to our full chorus with the Ode to Joy theme once again. A new theme is then introduced by a male chorus, the song of universal brotherhood of mankind, accompanied by cello, basses, and a bass trombone. The chorus sopranos and altos join in on this melody, transforming this section into a moment of transcendental beauty. As I've mentioned numerous times, this symphony is extremely complex, not only for the orchestra, but also the singers. So as you may have guessed, we have another double fugue, this time heard in the chorus, which is built on the two themes, our Ode to Joy and also the Universal Brotherhood theme. A tempo change bubbles with excitement, bringing us back to our four soloists singing a round canon that continuously builds, ascending to above for yet another key change. The orchestra slowly builds momentum, leading to a blaze of the loudest outburst of joy from the full force of the orchestra and voices. It has to be one of the most exciting, brilliant, and rewarding endings in all of music. Beethoven's Symphony No. 9 is a monumental masterpiece, which is why it has become a symbol and anthem for unity. We hope you enjoy this significant event to open the 73rd season of your Wyoming Symphony Orchestra.